What is economics? Economic defined by many experts as social science that deal with how people fulfill unlimited want with limited resources. In simple terms, economic is the study of scarcity. The goods and services produced in a country are limited as we cannot possibly satisfy all everyone wants due to the limited amount of factors of production. Thus, we need to make choices on what, how, and for whom to produce. But there is a problem lie when we realize the definition of scarcity is very much subjective. Both rich and poor people experience scarcity, but maybe for the rich, they're just contemplating either to buy a new car or a new seaside condominium. And for the poor, they are maybe choosing to buy daily food or paying for their monthly rent, which is essential to continue living. We can consider that scarcity of resources is closely related to Sustainable Development Goals of SDG 1, which is no poverty, and 2, which is zero hunger. Scarcity refers to a fundamental economic difficulty that a country faces on a regular basis. The scarcity of resources also refers to disparity between limited resources and unlimited human desires. Scarcity forces the consumer to make a choice on how to use the limited resources to meet all their unlimited resources. Economics would have nothing to study if we live in the world that have enough resources. There will be no decision to make. Therefore, in the real world, resources are scarce. Examples of resources that are scarce are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. What are key factors that contribute to scarcity? Economic scarcity has three basis causes, which are demand-induced, supply-induced, and structural shortage. The term demand-induced refers to a situation in which supply remains constant while demand increases. For example, during natural disaster, people will demand more for goods and services while the scarcity will remain the same. Supply-induced, on the other hand, occurs when the supply of a resources is less than the demand. Rapid supply loss might happen due to natural disasters such as drought and fire. When a portion of the population does not have access to the same resources as the rest of the population, inequality exists. This is referred to as structural discrimination. There are two forms of shortage that a country may face: relative scarcity and absolute scarcity. The term relative scarcity describes a situation in which the availability of resources is naturally limited, but it is also related to demand. On the other hand, absolute scarcity refers to resources that are naturally restricted but not in relation to demand. To put it in another way, there is nothing we can do to enhance supply. Time-based scarcity is an example of this form of scarcity. We also want to look at how a society deals with the issue. Increasing supply is one method that society can address this issue. We will have less of a scarcity problem if there are more goods and services available to the public. Next step is to reduce demand for non-essential goods and services such as food and shelter, will result in less scarce resources.
Does scarcity exist in the Islamic economy? What would happen if the quantity and quality of resources can be increased without constraints? Well, it will probably result in a significant growth in macro production. GDP will rise and it will look good on paper. However, it is a common misconception that more output equals increased societal welfare, because people believe that more goods and services are being produced to meet society's growing demands. The issue actually arises when there is a lack of focus on properly distributing the output. Widening wealth disparities fueled by the rapid production growth will simply result in a monopoly of ownership, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Islamic economics takes a unique philosophical view on the scarcity of resources. To answer the question of whether resources are scarce in the Islamic economy, we must first learn of its definition, philosophical value, and three key concepts, namely falah, revelation of resources, and participation and cooperation.
Zaidan Abu al-Makarim defined Islamic economics as a science that deals with wealth and its relation to man from the point of view of the realization of justice in all forms of economic activities. Conventional economics believes that the scarcity of resources is the root problem in the economy. However, Islam holds the view that the concept of scarcity as developed by the conventional economics does not exist, because everything created in this world is destined for humans, and that the true issue is achieving justice in wealth distribution and consumption in society.
In Surah Al-Ibrahim, verse 32 to 34, it is highlighted that there are an abundance of resources, which means that there is no absolute scarcity, and that the problem is actually human ungratefulness and greed. It is also reported in Hadith Sahih al-Bukhari. This hadith emphasizes humanity's insatiable and inherent greed, reiterating the premise that humans are to blame for their self-interest tendency to realize their needs. Moreover, in some regions, available resources may differ from those required to meet communities' needs, as in the case of famine. At a global level, resources are not scarce as defined by the Islamic economics philosophy, but resources are scattered all around. International trade and philanthropy are what aids in the interchange of resources and critical commodities. However, when those activities are not carried out justly, it will lead to inequitable resources distribution for some nations and regions. The ramifications result into what goes against the sustainable developmental goals as people fall into poverty and suffer from hunger-related mortality. At a micro level, we must realize that some families or individuals may have more resources than others. This was made clear in Surah Al-An'am, verse 165. He is the one who has placed you as successor on earth and elevated some of you in rank of others, so he may test you with what he has given you. Surely your Lord is swift in punishment, but he is certainly all-forgiving, most merciful. The concept of Islamic justice in the distribution of wealth does not imply that everyone should be paid the same amount regardless of their contribution to society. Because no two people are alike in nature, talent, or contribution to society, Islam tolerates income disparity to a degree. For instance, it is a common knowledge that someone who adopts this classification will be paid more than someone who works as a cleaner. This disparity is intended to put the rich people in society to the test in terms of sacrifice, cooperation, and participation. Islam prioritizes feeding the hungry and caring for the poor through zakat, which is obligatory charity, infaq, charitable donations, and wakaf, which are endowments. These are choices we make consciously in order to receive barakah on our wealth, while also doing our share in distributing resources to those who needs it most.
To recap, no, resources are not scarce in the Islamic economy. The problem lies in the equitable resources distribution.
Scarcity in conventional economics is regarded when there are finite resources in terms of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship that are used to produce goods and services. Land that is available for exploitation and development is referred to as land resources. Any resources that may be obtained from the land are also considered land resources. Practical activity that requires a lot of physical effort is considered labor. Labor can be divided into 4 categories, which are professional, semi-skilled, unskilled, and skilled labor. Capital is wealth in the form of money or other assets available for a purpose, such as starting a company or investing. It's a broad term that can refer to anything that gives its owner value or benefit. Lastly, entrepreneurial resources are identified as a person's ability to think creatively, act strategically, apply intuition, and recognize new opportunities. Existing economic systems indicate that scarcity exists and society's productive resources are insufficient to meet all human needs and ambitions. Even at the most evolved levels of technology, there is never enough of something to meet all of humanity's needs. The Islamic economic system, however, does not view scarcity as a result of the Earth's limited natural resources. It is founded on the notion that everything belongs to Allah Almighty and is a gift from Him. Scarcity of resources from the Islamic point of view is caused solely by humans' inefficient allocation and use of resources. It isn't a lack of monetary products, methods to satisfy needs, nor the lack of natural resources. True, raw material supplies are limited and human needs are vast and diverse. However, this does not imply that unmet human desires are to blame for economic issues. In Islamic economic system, societal fairness is advocated in every economic activity. With that, people are encouraged to practice economic fairness as part of efforts to increase human enjoyment. If moral ideas are not trusted and moral notions are not applied with discipline, this will be impossible to achieve. The Islamic economic system can benefit all societies because it approaches economic issues from a socialist perspective. It is safe to say that resource scarcity exists in traditional economics but is not recognized in Islamic economics. any shortage of resources is the consequence of man's reckless behavior. When a community focuses on sharing Allah's resources instead of exploiting them for profit, everyone has an equal chance to use them in whatever capacity is required. Efficiency is critical in a society with limited resources, and controlled morale will eventually ensure that everyone gets a fair share. But major changes take time, and for now, raising awareness about this issue is the best course of action.
Realistically speaking, scarcity exists in economics and this cannot be avoided. No one could control scarcity, including the government. We cannot control human desires and make more resources available to fulfill them. Instead of focusing on controlling scarcity, the government should help people who are still struggling to fulfill their basic needs. As government that has the authority to lead, they are accountable to meet people's needs. To counter this problem, what should the government do to control scarcity? Well, they need to look back to Maqasid Sharia, which summarize the basic needs of every human being. Firstly, the government should make public policies that take the opportunity to build professional growth so that people can attain reasonable opportunities in society's economic niche. This strategy is intended to help those who appear to be at the point of starting their life in a disadvantageous position, such as those who come from low-income households or who lack a strong foundation to function in society. Secondly, an initiative that the government could make is a redistribution program. This entails taking money from those with higher salaries and giving it to people with lower incomes. The Quran also stressed the payment of zakat to redistribute wealth from the wealthy to the needy. Obviously, such a redistribution has taken place today through the taxable income and the government's anti-poverty policy. Doing what is necessary will ensure a decent quality of living for all of its members. Third, the government could make inheritance tax to expedite the concentration of income in the community. This tax indicates a tendency to limit the amount of wealth that can be passed down as an inheritance. It seems inconvenient to not be able to pass down their money and possession to their descendants after all years of hard work. But on the other hand, many wealthy people also contend with their riches that they believe this tax would not damage them if they donated a portion of it to society. We must underline that no society can properly expect complete economic equality at any given time. To some extent, Islam also accepted inequality. Furthermore, pushing for economic equality too aggressively may be hazardous, as it may discourage labor and entrepreneurship due to excessively high redistribution and costly tax on the elites. On the other hand, a realistic desire for wealth redistribution should be pursued in order to promote economic output through appropriate methods such as improved education and the formation of political base that supports market forces. Since everyone is endowed with diverse capacities, interpersonal difference in income are natural and acceptable, according to Islamic economics.
Before I answer the question, let me tell you first what is Islamic economics. Simply expressed, Islamic economics is the study of economics through the lens of Islamic principles, or the process of bringing economics into compliance with the Sharia. As mentioned by the other speakers, scarcity, the concept of short supply, does not exist in Islamic economics. Response to the question, Islamic economics is applicable to both Muslim majority countries and Muslim minority countries. For concrete example, in 2004, Britain became the first non-Muslim country to follow this system by creating the Islamic Bank of Britain. In this age of globalization, the number of Muslim minority countries practicing Islamic economics is gradually increasing, such as Germany and Switzerland. The reason why these countries apply the Islamic economics instead of conventional economics is because of the benefits that they can gain. The benefits are reducing the impact of harmful products, encouraging stability in investment, and accelerating economic progress. In view of the fact that those countries implement Islamic economics, they cannot resist the concepts of Islamic economics as well as the concept of scarcity. Therefore, the concept of scarcity in Islamic economics is not only applicable to Islamic countries, but also applicable to all countries that implement them, as all the implementers must follow and keep up to date with the changes of the concept of Islamic economics. To conclude, in Islamic economics, there is no such thing as scarcity. Scarce resources exist in conventional economics because they regard human wants more important than the resources available. They blame the lack of resources for the scarcity that occurs. Scarcity only occurs because of the inefficient and unfair personality of humans when it comes to distribution of the resources. Anyone, including the government, could not regulate scarcity. Rather than focusing on scarcity, the government should work with people to provide their basic needs. Government policies that foster professional growth should be implemented. In SDG 1 and SDG 2, its focus is on economic growth to end poverty and hunger. As in the case of hunger, available resources may differ from those required to meet community demands in some areas. Resources are not rare on a global scale, as described by Islamic economics, but they are dispersed around the world. The exchange of resources and key goods is aided by international trade and philanthropy. However, if those activities are not carried out fairly, some nations and areas will face inequitable resource distribution. As a result of the repercussions, individuals fall into poverty and die as a result of hunger-related mortality, which is contrary to the SDG.